Well, hello and welcome. Tonight we are looking at working with colour in Affinity Designer. I, Elaine Giles, a long-time trainer, podcast host, love my software, big geek, and particularly at the moment the software that I use the most is Affinity Designer, closely followed by Affinity Photo. But I have long left behind other software, the name of which shall not be mentioned. But what I've found incredibly useful as I've been working with Affinity Designer is to try and understand all the features that it has in relation to colour that have really helped me tighten up my workflow and be able to work so much faster. So they're the kind of things that we're going to be looking at tonight. So I'm going to start off with, there are different colour models, and you have RGB, Cmyk, lab colour and greys. I'm going to go through just a few slides to show you what I'll be talking about in this session because it'll be a fairly long session, but I hope that you stick with it because the feedback I've had when I've done this session for Affinity Photo is, wow, didn't know it could do that. So stick with it. These are the topics we're going to be covering. So the different types of colour models that you've got, the global colour picker, which you may very well have found, but there's also another one, which is the colour picker tool. So the two do a similar job. There is a lot of overlap between them, but also very distinct things to do with them as well. Then I'll be looking at moving on from single colours to be looking at multiple colours. And with the multiple colours, you'll be looking at making colour palettes. And there are three types of colour palettes that you would need to understand in Affinity applications: document, application and system. We will be looking at all three of them. By the end of the session, you will completely understand the difference between them, when to use each one and why to use them. Now, the thing with colour swatch formats is there's a huge range of them. You can download them from the internet, you can get them from other applications, but there's just so many of them. There are ASEs, ACOs, CLRs, AIs, afpalettes, and all other kinds of formats. And the problem with that is you may have assets in terms of colours from other applications, from colleagues, downloaded from the internet, from previous work that you've done, and you'd like to use those in Affinity Designer and you don't know how to get them in there. So I'll be showing you that as well. Even file formats that are not directly supported, you can do it. I will show you how. So let's go in and actually have a look at it doing it. So first thing to do, get Affinity Designer up. Don't be on a go slow tonight. Where you go. Right, so Affinity Designer. First thing I'm going to need, new blank file. So I'll just get new blank file and very quickly show you the global colour picker. Now, global colour picker is over here in the colour panel. So there are two panels. First of all, there's the colour panel and the swatches panel that both are to do with colour. And you could be forgiven on a first look to think, don't know when I should be using each one. Why are they different? They're both to do with colour. I will explain that. But the first thing to understand is the actual interface and what you have got in here. So first things first, there's lots of little symbols and some of them just look like they're giving you information, but all of these are interactive. Every single thing that I'm highlighting there can be clicked, and when you do, it does stuff. So the white swatch that you have, the white circle, is showing you the fill, and the black one at the back, it's black at the moment, is showing you the stroke. Then there's the smaller circle, which is the white one with the red line through it. That is how you make something transparent. So that's what you've got there. The arrow, the double-headed arrow that's pointing either direction, lets you flick between the two. Now that's quite difficult for me to do at the moment, but I will try it. There we are. I'm clicking it. If I'm in just the right place, I'm in just the right place there, and it just switches them over. So it enables you to just flip the colours around. But what we're interested in first is this little eyedropper and the circle. Because you look at that, and the first time I looked at it, I thought, well, that's all very well. It's showing me that I've got black. The black's my default colour. That's all it's showing me. But actually, it's interactive. So let's have a look at that. So first thing I'm going to do, just get a couple of shapes on here and do some fills with them. So I will put a fill in these. So we'll take two fills there. And just show you how this thing works. It doesn't look like it's an interface element, but it really is. So you click and hold the left mouse button and drag over things. So if I drag over the orange and then release it, it loads that colour into the little swatch next to it. Loads it into it. If I do that again, but this time on the blue, it loads that in. Now, it's a two-step process if you actually want to use it. And what I mean by that is I will draw out here another squarish shape. So I want to pick up that blue and I want to make that blue. So I drag across, pick up the blue, it loads it into the swatch. But to apply it to the element that's selected, which is the the square on the right hand side, I need to then click it once. So it's a two-step process. But it does do it. So that's the good news. It does do it. So I mentioned here I could flip these round. So if I flip them round, it puts black as the fill and blue as the border. If I move in, we do see that there is a blue border, but oh, it's tiny. So what I would do is make that bigger with the stroke, and you will see then it's blue even when I zoom out. And that is what it's referring to when I go to the colours and I flip them over. It inverses them. So all the elements of that interface there can be used, but it's not obvious that some of them can be clicked and what they do. So now you've got that. Right, the default in this window is to use the colour wheel, which is what we're looking at now. And you may or may not like the colour wheel. The first time I worked with Affinity Designer, I thought I'm not overly keen on that. I was used to selecting colours from a spectrum view, really, rather than this wheel. How the wheel works is by switching it round, so you can go all the way around, and then using the second dot in the middle to change the hue slightly of the colour that you have selected in the outer wheel. When you realise that, it's simple and I don't know what I was struggling with. Now I actually quite like it, but at the beginning it was so unusual from what software I was coming from. I must admit I wasn't overly keen on it, but that's how it works. You also have the opacity, which will take the opacity up and down at the bottom. And you may think that that is all that does, and it's not. You would be wrong. You have a menu as in common with virtually every other panel in Affinity Designer. And that menu gives you access to extra elements. So when I go into there, you can see you have wheel, sliders, boxes, tints, and some other extra options. But the top four, the wheel, sliders, boxes, and tint, are to do with how that panel actually displays. So if you're more comfortable using sliders, you can change it to sliders and then pick your colours that way. So if you've come from an application, I'm thinking Sketch uses sliders. So if you use Sketch a lot and you would like sliders rather than the wheel, you can certainly change it and it will remember that across starts and closes of the application. So when you restart, it will remember how you had it set. You still have your spectrum at the bottom, which will give you a starting point of green, and then you can sort of alter the precise green you're looking for or whatever other colour you want to work with. And you have your opacity at the bottom, so you don't lose any features as you change the interface. You also have your RGB, your hex values, hue, saturation and light, Cmyk, lab and grayscale. So within each view, you can actually change the colour space that you're working with. You can change all of that inside there. I'm going to stick to RGB, is pretty much the default. Then I'm going back and this time I'm choosing boxes. This one lets me choose the colour across the top and then alter the hue slightly within the large box at the bottom. So it's all just a different way of doing the same thing. On to the last one, which is tint, which doesn't seem to do much. But it does let you just tint that colour slightly. So you can alter the colours slightly with that one. I'm going to leave it set on the wheel. I think most people probably by now have got used to the wheel. I certainly use the wheel more than I use any of those other options. But that's what I will do there. Now you need to be aware that this little thing, which is what we're concentrating on initially, which is your eyedropper up there, but actually I would call that the global colour picker, because it isn't just in that colour panel. If we switch panels and go to the Swatches panel, you will see exactly the same thing. In fact, everything's the same. The transparent option underneath the black and the blue is the same. The black and the blue are the same. The arrow's the same, and they all do the same. So that little symbol that we're using as a global colour picker is in both of those panels, but it's also elsewhere as well. So if I go up to fill, you will see we have one up there. So it's pervasive, it's all over the interface, and it does exactly the same thing all over the interface. If I go down and select a colour there, go back to it and click, it will apply that colour. So it works exactly the same way as well. If I go into the stroke, it's on the stroke. So there's lots of dialog boxes that you will work in, and you will see that. And it's just putting it near where your mouse probably is to enable you to use it if you need to go and use it. Now, important thing to understand about that way of selecting colours is you're not limited to just elements on your canvas. If I go and get that, I can show you that as I move around, I'm even being shown underneath R255, G255, B255. It's on a sort of semi-transparent black background with a white border on it. And as I move over different colours, it's giving me a different RGB. And as I move over, now it's got a blue edge on it. So it's giving me useful feedback, but I'm also here able to choose elements outside of the window. Not just inside the interface. So if I wanted one of these blue squares, if I think that that one is particularly nice, I can click, or actually I can let go, I can release it. It loads it in over on the right hand side, and I can then click to apply it. So let's see that again with one of these orange bits. So hover over it, you get to see the RGB, it shows you it's going to pick an orange, it's got an orange border on it, and then just release the mouse button. It loads it in, click once to apply it. But it gets even better than that, because you can also select elements outside of Affinity Designer itself. So what I'm going to do is I've got OneNote open, Microsoft OneNote on the other screen. So you're going to see this disappear off the screen, over to the other screen, hover over OneNote, release, and it's loaded in the OneNote purple. Just so you know, I wasn't cheating. Let's go and get my desktop colour by doing the same. Up there, onto my desktop, and then apply that. And then take that back full screen. So you can choose from the interface of Affinity Designer, you can choose outside Affinity Designer, you can choose any screen that is attached to your computer. So that one is really flexible when it comes to making selections. It is the two-step process though, and it's also in all of the dialog boxes. But you also have a dedicated tool, and the dedicated tool is down on the left-hand side towards the bottom of the tools panel, which is rather strange because if you're an Affinity Photo user, it's near the top. Luckily, the shortcut keys are the same. It's the I key, I for eyedropper. So this time I'm clicking on there and I've selected a colour. I've selected the tool rather. What I need to do to select a colour is just to go into it and click once. You'll notice I say click once. I did. I just hovered, clicked, hovered, clicked. The element that's selected, which was the box with the black border on the right hand side, is automatically changing its fill. This is not a two-step process. It's a one-step process with this, as long as you have the default settings. So let's look at the default settings. Up here, there is an apply to selection and there is a tick in it. If I took the tick out of there and went back and did exactly the same thing, click, 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 nothing's happening. But it is working, because if we look up in the top right hand side, that's blue at the moment. I go back and I get my orange and it has changed to orange. So it's working. It's just that by taking that tick out of the box, it stopped it applying automatically. I always want that to be applying automatically. So I would enable that, and then when I go back in and click it, it goes back and it's working. The other thing is where the colour is coming from, and initially it's set to source global. Now, what that means is it's going to take it from all of the objects, but it's saying current object is an alternative, which means other elements in there. So if I were to change that to current object and go and click on this blue one, it's just setting it to white. Why is it set it to white? Wouldn't you think it had set it to blue? Because you're over the blue one. The answer to that is no, and it hasn't really made it white either. What it's done is it's picked up the background colour from that location where my mouse is hovered, which is on the blue square, on this layer over here, this object layer, which is the orange one. No, I'm the white one at the minute, aren't I? So it's picked up that one. That's because I said current object, so just pick it from the current object. But because that's the current object, if I did actually manage to click it just right on the border, I could get the black edge and fill it with black, but it is only going to pick from either the white elements or just that black, because it's all that's on this particular layer. If I go back and change that to global, then I can click all over the place and I don't have to have the source point activated. Okay, so this one, slightly different behavior, but 99% of the way it works is pretty similar. Right, so that's the dedicated colour picker tool, but there's one more thing that it can do that's actually very useful. To see that, I'm going to need to load in a different image. So I've got my data somewhere. Grey squares isn't going to help me, is it? So let's have a look at my data. Where's my data gone? It is somewhere in here. I will get, I'm on my other screen, and what I'm doing is I'm just opening up my data file so I can go and get a file. I need to get that from my desktop, and I think I'll use Bruno. Bruno is a picture of a dog, and it is a picture, so it's pixel based. But it will work to change to get my colours. So I'm going to put a square on there. That's the element I want the colour to be picked up from. So we've already got, let's get our eyedropper tool, and we already know that we can select from anywhere, and it will put the colour that I select in the currently selected object, and that is working perfectly, even though it is a pixel-based image it's pulling from. But I might want something where I want this sort of brown, but oh, I didn't think it was quite that brown, or the pink on his tongue, didn't think it was quite that pink, thought it was a deeper pink. This is because in my presets, the default is a point preset of 1 pixel by 1 pixel. So if I zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in until you could actually see the individual pixels, what I'm selecting is one of those. That one, that one, that one. They're all slightly different, but zoomed out, it's very difficult to tell whether I'm going to get a lighter pixel or a darker pixel. For that reason, you have different presets. You can choose an average, and you can choose from 6 different types of averages. So if we start with a 3x3 average and move over there, you probably won't see much difference as I go around. You'll see a little bit of difference, but not too much. As I go up this, if I go up to 257 and I click on that bit there, you might be surprised that that doesn't look anything like the golden brown. It's more very deep greyish colour. That's because an average of 257 by 257 pixels square is huge, and it's covering the entire brown bit, but it's also taking in a lot of the black and the white fur as well. So the trick with the average is to take an average as small as you possibly can to give you a good reference. So in that case there, that's probably about right. It's changing colour a little bit, but it's giving me a good average. I would say, looking at that colour in the top right and the little fur above his eyes, that is a good average for that. But if you take a big average and you click on that white bit in the middle, it's nothing like white. So it's sort of even darker than brown, that very dark browny black colour. So keep the average as tight as you possibly can to get the kind of colour that you're looking for. So that one's very dark. That one's more purpley. There is purple in the eye. If you zoom in enough, so let me zoom in, you can see there is actually purple in there, so it's done a very good job of picking that up. We go on to the blue and then go out. Yep, it's picked it up more purpley, so a blue mixed with the purple that's around it. So just keep it as tight as possible. So I will change that back to 1 pixel. Right, so we've seen the difference between the two there. So I would say the eyedropper is absolutely essential if you're looking for an average. Most of the time I find myself using the global one from the swatches or the colour panel just because it's there and it's quicker, and I've probably got another tool selected. And that way I don't have to change tools. So that's a good way of thinking about it and working with it. Right, so we've looked at the colour panel. We've gone through that with its features and its opacity, etc. There's another panel that you can use when you're working with colours, and that is the swatches panel. And you may be thinking, why is there 2 of them? I tend to think of it in terms of the colour panel is for dealing with a single colour, 1 colour at a time. And the swatches panel is for dealing with multiple colours at a time. You do have a lot of overlap though between them. Everything that you can do in the colour panel with one colour, you can do in here. So if we do a quick comparison, we've got these shapes, all of those are available in the Swatches panel. And our opacity, which is a slider at the bottom going across to the 100% there, we go up to the swatches, all of that is there. The shapes are exactly the same. So the stroke, the fill, the transparency, the flip, and the colour dropper are all the same. The opacity is there over on the right hand side as just a drop down though. There is no slider, it's just a drop down. Because this bit of the dialogue needs to have extra information in to enable you to work with multiple colours and multiple colours at the same time in a palette. So what you have in here is you have all of these palettes, named palettes, available from within the palettes drop down. These are named palettes. I will come back to those, they are very important. But then you have a little button as well. You have these 4 swatches here, and these are always the same. There is the transparency one, which is the white with the red arrow with a red line through it. There is the black, 50% grey and white. They are there all the time, irrespective of what panel you're using, whichever palette you're using, because Affinity Designer figures you might need black, you might need white, you might need grey, and you might need transparent. So I actually find that really useful. It means they're in a consistent location all the time when you need to use them. And then you have the actual colour swatches from within the palette. And as you select different palettes in here, like crayons, they change. You can also choose things like, let's have a look at these Pantones. In the Pantones, you can see just how many there are. So there's hundreds of colours in each of these. I'll be working mainly with sort of less than 10 tonight, but you can just keep adding them and create whole ranges of them. I'll show you one that I've actually created, which is the Our Parishes one. And in here, I've actually got a colour that I don't need from another demonstration, which I will lose. But in here, I have just a few colours. The first one, as I said, was added later. So the ones I actually use are start with the maroon, then the pink, the other one's a pale blue, then a very pale yellow. So they're all very, very pale, but those are the colours I actually use. And I took the time to be very good here, and I was very disciplined. And as I hover over that, you can see it actually has a name on it. It says All Our Parishes. And as I move to the next one, that says All Saints. And as I go through the colours, it's got the name of each church. I've named the colours. That is useful because although I've only got a handful of colours there, even on my screen, and I'm sure on your screen watching it, these colours are so pale, they all look basically white. As I add colours to this, as I keep working, it's going to be very difficult to know which is which. So this option at the bottom would enable me to find the one for All Saints. As I type the word all in and then carry on, it limits me down to 2, All Saints and All Parishes. And then as I start typing the word Saints, it limits me down to the one colour which represents that particular church. So that allows you to search. That is one of the reasons I would take the time and I would name these colours. Now, I think this colour here, I'm not sure if that had a name at all. Yes, it's called Our Parishes because I added it. What I can do is right click and I can rename that. So if that actually meant something, so let's say this was my header banner colour, I could put in header banner. And now when I go to my filter, I can type in header and it will filter down just to that colour. So do take the time. It's worth taking the time in the long run. I know if you're anything like me what you're thinking. Not going to have time to do that. It'll be far quicker. I'll remember what they're for. I'll put them in a certain place. You won't. You won't. They'll all move around and then you'll get annoyed. So take the time and name them. Right, now we've got this purple one up here. I'm going to start doing things with this now. In terms of we'll add that and we'll create new palettes and stuff. But before we go any further, let's go back and look at the names of those palettes. I've been demoing on this machine, so I've got a lot of palettes. But I can show you that at the top here, we have 3 palettes. We have the greys, the colours and the gradients. Next to them, they have a symbol. And the symbol that they have is the Affinity symbol. Not Affinity Designer nor Affinity Photo, but actually the company Affinity. Serif Affinity, it's their logo. And what that means is these things have a meaning. They are not there randomly. They are not there just to prettify the interface. They mean something. The greys, the colours and the gradients are colour palettes that are only available within Affinity Designer. You could not access that gradients palette elsewhere. It's just available within Affinity Designer. Although the greys, colours and gradients happen to be in Affinity Photo as well, they are not the same copies of them. So if you made changes to them in here, they would not be replicated in Affinity Photo. These are strictly application-only settings. As you come down, Affinity, Microsoft Office, all kinds of other palettes, they have the Apple logo next to them. Some of you may be looking at some of these, and I'll admit there's so many there, I'll forgive you if you don't. But you might think, oh, WebSafe colours, I've seen that before. You might think crayons, seen that before. And the Apple and the System palettes. So these are palettes of colours that have swatches within them. And those 4 are the default palettes on your Mac. So if you bought a new Mac and you installed it, and you looked at your colour palettes, your default system palettes, you would see those 4 palettes. Now, when I installed Scrivener, I got another one straight away, and I thought, whoa, where did that come from? Scrivener installed it so it can store its colours in a central location. And then as I started working, I started adding my own. So I've added Affinity, and I've added Microsoft Office, and the Soap one, and the Golden Beach. I've added all of these. I've added all of these to the system. And you can do that too. Now, the Pantone ones are slightly different. They are Pantone, they are available, they are global colours that the rationale for having Pantone is that they are colour matched. So they will, if you say to a print house, print me out with Pantone 123, you know exactly, precisely what colour you will get. So that's why they're there. But at the very, very beginning, I said there were 3 types of colour palettes. There was system palettes, there was application palettes, and there was document palettes. And we haven't got a document palette. We haven't got a document palette because this particular document doesn't have a document palette. It doesn't have one. What I'm going to do at this stage, and I suppose it's good practice, but the reason I'm going to do it is because when I last did this, it crashed. So I'm going to save this file to make sure that it is an Affinity Designer file before we go on any further. So I will save it. Now it's saying this contains non-pixel elements. What do you want to do with it? And I want to save it as a new file because I want all these elements to remain editable. So I'm going to do a save as, and I am going to put this on my desktop, which I probably shouldn't do, should I? But I will. I shall call it Bruno. So it's on my desktop and it's called Bruno, and now it is an Affinity Designer file. Within it, I have this purple button. So I've got my purple button at the top, and I also have the background, which is a pixel layer, which is the dog. Now, what I would like to do is to add a new palette to the whole. And there we go. Didn't I say it would crash? Didn't I say it would crash? Oh, Affinity, what are you doing to me? Luckily, I saved the file, which means I can go into it. So I'm going to choose to ignore that. And yes, restore any files that have got lost. What are you doing to me tonight, honestly? Right, all I was trying to do was go up to my menu here and show you that what I wanted to do was add a new palette. And I do that with one of these 3 options: add application palette, document palette, and system palette. I have to choose what type of palette I want. Now, how do you choose between them? Well, if you make an application palette, that will be available within Affinity Designer for all of your files. If you make a document palette, that will be available within this specific document within Affinity Designer. If you make a system palette, it will be available everywhere, including other applications, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, Scrivener, you name it. Anywhere that uses the global system colour picker, it will be available. So my thinking when I create palettes is, do I want this only in Affinity Designer? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no, because I need to do other branding jobs for clients in Pages, in Word. I know clients still use Word, it's horrible, but I need to. Probably Keynote, maybe PowerPoint, and I don't want my colours locked up in Affinity Designer. So I would rule out an application palette. That leaves me a document palette or a system palette. And most of the time, I'm going to go for that system palette. But today, For this file, I'm just going to make a document palette so we can see what happens, as long as it doesn't crash. I'm going to save it again just in case. I've now got a new empty palette and it says unnamed. Just show you that it does say unnamed. Now, I need to name that before we go any further, and you do that from the menu. You go down underneath the new palette options and choose to rename the palette. And I'm going to call this one Bruno Brown. I could regret this later because I've made lots of palettes called Bruno and Bruno Brown. But I'm going to make this one called Bruno Brown. It won't clash with anything because it's a document palette. There would be nothing to stop me. Let's go in and have a look. There would be nothing to stop me having a document palette, an application palette, and a system palette, all called Bruno Brown. Not that I recommend it, but you could do because they don't clash with each other. But you couldn't have 2 document palettes, 2 application palettes, or 2 system palettes called Bruno Brown. So just something to bear in mind. Right, we've now got Bruno Brown. So now we've got him, now we need to add colours to the colour palette. And you can do that in a number of ways. I will show you, first of all, you can right click here. You can, well actually no, that's not going to help, is it? The easiest way to do it is to make sure that you've got a colour selected and then hit this button here that looks like a little palette. There are 2 of them, don't worry about that. I'm going to come and talk about the second one in a moment. But the first one will add the current fill to the currently selected palette, and there is the purple added. It added that because it was selected up there. So now what I need to do is to go through and choose some colours. Now, because I don't need to do anything really with it, I'm going to go into here and I'm going to choose some colours. This will change so you can see what colour I've got selected, and then all I need to do is to go back and start adding these colours to it. So let's get that petrol blue colour. Let's get some pinks off the tongue here. A deeper brown down there. Don't forget, as you're doing this, if you want an average colour, then you can choose averages here and you can get different colours there. So let's add that one. Let's get an average over here. That's more greeny. So I'm using the features that I had of that colour picker tool to get some colours and then to add them. So I've now got these shades added to the Bruno Brown palette, the document palette called Bruno Brown. I will even save the file. I will now go back into that file that I had, which had our squares in it. And let's say I wanted to use that Bruno Brown purple. So I go over here to my palettes and I click the drop down and Bruno Brown isn't there. My palette called Bruno Brown is not there. That's because it's a document palette and it's only available in that particular document. And that's why you need to be very careful, because sometimes at the beginning you'll think, I'm only making 1 document, it'll be fine. And before you know it, you've made 5 more and now your colours are locked in the individual document. This is why, as you look at my installation, you can see I've got a lot of system palettes. I have a lot of system palettes. But document palettes have their use. They really have their use. Let's go and have a look at that. So at the moment, we've got the Bruno Brown document palette. Let's go and make a different type of palette. So go up here, and this time I'm going to add a system palette. And I don't have a system palette called Bruno Brown. I have one called Bruno. Please ignore that, it was a previous demo. And it probably has different colours in it anyway. So I'll go in and I will rename this, and hopefully it won't create problems when I name it Bruno Brown. And save that. Now, because you can have palettes with the same name, that's when the symbols become important, isn't it? Because we know just by looking at it that that is a system palette, whereas this Bruno Brown is a document palette because the icons are there. That's why it's important. So we're going to work with this Bruno Brown one. I'm just going to do the same thing again and add some colours to it. So with my colour picker, I will go through and I will just add some colours to it. They'll be different than the colours were before. There is some purple in his eye up there, so let's add some of that. And we'll go for 5 colours. We can get 5 colours, can't we? Nice petrol-y blue. Let's add that one. And a deeper brown. Let's add that one. So we've got some colours in there now. Right. We can, in here, because at the moment, if we right-click on it and go to rename, it'll be called Bruno Brown 5. And all that's telling you is it's the 5th colour that was added to the Bruno Brown palette. Not helpful. We should call this something descriptive like light brown, sandy brown. We've got this one here that would be good as petrol blue, so I will rename that. Just call that petrol. And that's how you would name it and start building it up. And again, when you start searching down here and you're looking for petrol, it will filter for you, and you can then click on there and it will let you use that colour. So do take the time to do this. It really is worth the investment in the time. Right, okay, so we've done that. We've got 2 palettes at that point. Now, this one is a system palette. So, if I go back, make sure I've saved this file, then I go back over here, and I go back into my colour palettes over here. Let's have a look what we've got. We still don't have any document palettes, not created one for this one, but as I go down here, there is Bruno Brown, because it's a system palette. So I will click there to activate it, and now I can start using the colours in it. And I'm using them across 2 applications there. Now, what I did before, let's take a slight detour at this point, but it's a worthwhile detour, honestly. I do this mainly with Keynote, but before I was doing it with Pages. So let's have a look at Pages. Pages is up, and here it is. Right, I've been playing with this, you'll be able to tell that. I've been playing in here. Right, what I have in here is just some coloured squares. The default colour is this blue one up here. And I've been playing with a colour palette. I've been colouring them. What you can do in any Mac application that supports the system-wide colour picker is use it. And you think the system-wide colour picker is really basic. It's not. Oh, trust me, it's not. It's really clever. First thing to be aware of is I want to choose a different colour, so I'll click the drop down. I can do that, but there's not many colours in there to choose from. What if I want orange, but that's not the right orange? Well, what you can do is you have this little symbol here, and that, it says click to show or create your own. What it means is show me the system colour picker, which is here, which should either look like that by default, or you will see these crayons by default that actually looks like pencils. And you can use that, and you can click and click and click and choose them from in here. But when I said this hides all its best features, it really does hide all its best features. Trust me, honestly, it does. It's amazingly powerful. I did a 25-minute video on it, and I could have talked for an hour. I know you're thinking I could talk for an hour anyway, but it was worth it. I showed things. So from within here, you can choose colours in lots and lots of different ways. Don't discount this colour picker. It's amazing. You've got your sliders. You've got different coloured sliders. So these are looking very similar to the ones in Affinity now. Work with these. But you also have in here colour palettes. You've got your web safe. You've got all kinds of colour palettes. But we've come up with a problem. Straight away, we've got a problem. I've got a Bruno one, but I don't have Bruno Brown. Where's Bruno Brown gone? Well, the issue is we've just created it. It was instantly available in Affinity because Affinity created it. But it loads these in when you open the application, and Pages was already open. So that won't help, will it? What I would need to do is to save this file and close Pages down, then go back into Pages, get my recent documents, open up that file again and do exactly the same again. So I'll choose this blue one at the top. I'll go in and click that button. You'll notice when I click that button, it goes blue. The background of it toggles between grey and blue. Blue means it's locked on. It's important. It's locked on. So it's locked on to whatever I select in here. So if I choose this one, you can see the colour next to it changes to orange. It's locked on. So once it's locked on, I need to go into here. I'm in my 3rd tab, which is my colour palettes. And now I go into here, and where's my Bruno Brown? There is Bruno Brown sitting happily under Bruno. So if I select that, you can see everything that I did in Affinity Designer ripple through to Pages in this case, but also Keynote, Numbers, Sketch if that uses it, anything that uses the system one, anything at all that uses the system one will be able to access exactly the same colours. And as I go through here, I can apply them so quickly. All I need to do is just click to select the item and click the colour that I want. So don't discount that macOS colour picker. It's amazing. There are other things that you can do in here as well, so I suggest you watch the video. It's also extensible. So I've got an extra little tab that you might not have, which I can do another video about. So I really do use this all the time. And that locking on is just fantastic because it makes working with it so quickly. So I could go in here, you could see some of these other ones I've got, like I've got Microsoft Office. So if I wanted a little colour swatch that represented each of those, it's really simple for me to do. The reason I bothered to create this is that I'm making training materials all the time, and these are the colours that I need access to. I even have a Microsoft one, which has got loads of colours in it, from Office 365 all the way through all of their applications, different versions of their applications, their brand Pantone colours, they are all in there. So I know if I'm using one of these colours, I'm using the right colour from Microsoft. I am not going to have to worry about it being slightly off, or because they get quite snippy if I use the wrong colour. So it's a really good way to work. And obviously it makes sense to have this in design applications, but a lot of the time I'm in Keynote or I'm in Pages and I'm making trainer materials. So to have that available from the global colour picker is amazing. So we created it in Affinity Designer, but we can use it anywhere else. So that's one of the things to be aware of. Now we've done that. We've got all three types of palette that we've looked at. We now need to look at the actual colours themselves. Not all colours are equal. So what I'll do, I think I had a file that was nice. It just had boxes on it. Hopefully this is Affinity Designer and not Affinity Photo. Oh, it's Affinity Photo. We don't want Affinity Photo. Wrong file. Were you grey squares? Was that it? There we go. Grey squares. Lovely. Let's start with this one. Let's see what we can do with this one. Right, so I have a range of grey coloured squares. Exciting, isn't it? In fact, it's opened that in Photo as well. What are you doing opening it in Photo? And you know, it's so subtle. It's so subtle. I'm sure I did that in here, but never mind. What I'll do is I will just create one. I will move these up and we'll use this. I will use this one as a reference. So I will quickly copy and paste some of these, move that into the right place and duplicate. No, you didn't duplicate, did you? Come along. We have another one of those. Right, so that'll do. I've got some squares. In fact, I'll even make the squares grey so we all feel comfortable. We've not got different colours in it. They will all be grey. Let's go to the greys, which is an application palette, and choose a very pale grey. There we go. So we have the swatches that we need. Because I'm going to show you something now. Move this one out of the way. Right, I've got these colours here. These squares. Right, they are coloured grey. But let's say we've got a client and we want them to be a different colour. So I'm suggesting for a client that they have something of a particular colour. And let's say I think what would be a good colour would be one of Bruno's colours. I think a good colour for their branding material would be that colour. I think that would be good. So I go through and I say, I think this would be a good colour. And they come back and they say, don't like that. You know, as clients do. Got to love clients. They would like it much brighter, so maybe they would like it pink, which means I've got to remember as I go into my files what was actually formatted in what sort of way, which is going to be difficult for me. Just show you the type of file that I'm talking about that I might need to do that with. Now I found my grey squares file, you wouldn't believe it, would you? But I also have this other file, so let me open up this other one. This is a file that I've demonstrated before, but this is where I would use this. So I have a file here, and you can see there's a brand colour in use. It's this maroony colour. This brand colour is in use. And as it happens, the client was very, very happy with that. But if they hadn't been very happy with it, that would have been an issue, wouldn't it? So I have a document palette. My document palette for this file, just this file, only has one colour in it. It's got this colour in it. So let's say that they decide they're going to rebrand. If I go into this and I choose to edit that colour, so I'm in here and I am editing a single colour, and I want it to be they're thinking of an aqua colour. Oh joy. So I make an aqua colour. Look what's happening. There's my aqua colour. Whoa, that was fast. That's the kind of way I like to work. Let's do it that way. Everything has updated. If I just zoom in to show you that, the letterhead has updated. All of this has updated. And as I go down to the with complement slip, all of that has updated. I have now just realised I have made a mistake. Naughty me. That hasn't updated. So It was the right colour. Let's have a look at it. It was the right colour. It just wasn't that particular colour. So if I apply that colour to it, and then we do the same again, let's go in and let's edit that colour, edit the fill. And now they're on to pink. They think they want pink. Now the whole thing is changing to pink. Let's make it a lurid pink. So that's pretty amazing, but how is that happening? How is that happening? And that's what I'm going to do with this. So I'm going to undo that and get us back to, well, let's all be on brand. That's the on brand colour, and I'm going to go back to here because they wanted pink. How did I do that? Now what I'm going to do with this is, let's say this is the brand colour I think they should have. So I apply it to all the elements in my file, which I'm keeping really, really, really straightforward here. It couldn't be much more straightforward than this. All I'm doing here is just applying it to some squares. But we will do it. We will create another swatch file, and we will do it correctly on a much more advanced file, but I'm keeping it really basic. All we need to do is to add this colour as a global colour, which is the top option from the menu. Add a global colour. Now, before we do that, let's have a look what we've got. We're on Bruno Brown, system palette. We've got 5 colours in it. All I want to do is add a colour. The colour actually came from Bruno Brown originally, but I'm going to say add a global colour. And as I do that, it brings up all of this. And I'm thinking, just a minute, I just want to add that as a global colour. There is a reason behind this. Let's go and do it properly. Let's choose the colour from there. Let's add it to here. And let's call this brand colour. So it would probably be called main brand colour or whatever, primary brand colour, but we'll just do that. And as I hit add, something happened. It was very subtle. Let's go and have a look. It created a document palette and my other colours disappeared. And if you previously to watching all of this, you did that, you'd be thinking, oh no, I've lost all my colours, what's gone on? And you start getting annoyed that it's doing things. It's actually helping you though. Don't panic. All right, let me show you that you have this document palette. So this is new and it's got one colour in it. All your other palettes are still here, including Bruno Brown. You can get that back to that if you need to. But using the colour that you have just created in the Documents palette, I'm going to select all of these shapes. And I'm just going to apply that swatch. Nothing looked like it changed, but it did. It didn't change in colour, but it changed in terms of which swatch was actually applied to it. Now it is this colour from the Document palette. And as I hover over there, you can see there is a little triangle in the lower left corner, which is obviously trying to tell you something. And if you don't know what, you're none the wiser. But that little triangle, bottom left, means this is a global colour. And a global colour is the type of colour where, once it's applied, if you go in and edit it, it will update all the elements that have that colour applied to it. So now I don't care how many times the client wants the colour changed. I'll just build them individually for each one. But it's a doddle. It's very, very difficult if you don't have the global colours. The global colours are the key to this. It's a doddle. So that was it in concept. Let's have a look at it actually in practice in a real file. This is actually the client's file. Luckily, I know the client very well, so they don't mind me using it. But this is actually the file. So this one here has an element in it and it's black. If we look in the panel over here, it's actually a shape, it's black. So we should be able to apply some kind of colour to it. So we could make it blue. That's not helpful because it's done it to the text as well. But somewhere in here, there will be the curve. There we go, just change the background to blue. This colour at the moment is not a global colour. So there's no point applying it anywhere else at the moment because it's not a global colour. But this file already has a document palette, a document palette in the panel. And it has one global colour in it. Previously, when we looked at these panels, so I'm going to have a look at let's have a look at the crayons one. I said there was a button there, palette icon, and next to it there was another one, and it's gone. It's not there. Right, it's not there because they don't want you to add a global colour to a system palette. But if we go back to the document one, the one that had the one global colour in it, there is our extra icon. And our extra icon, I wish I could zoom in more, but there's a tiny little symbol next to it and it's got like a link on it. And what it's telling you is that that's adding it as a global colour. So I would like to add the blue that is selected as a global colour. and it has added it, and it has put the triangle in the corner. So now if I go down to this shape, which was the black continuation page, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so we can see both of those. Let's zoom in so we can see just the top of the letterhead. This is why you don't call things black continuation. You call it alternate continuation. But then it's do as I say and not as I do. But I'll go in and I'll fix that later on, I promise. So what I've got in here, there is my curve there, which is what I've got selected. And I want to apply this global colour to that. Now, what would happen if I now changed the colour? Which one would change? Let's have a quick question. Which one would change? Would the top one change, the bottom one change, or both change? The answer to that depends on whether the top one and the bottom one both had the global colour applied, or whether I only created the global colour from the top one but didn't apply it. Let's go for broke. Let's add a deal breaker here, which is we'll select the text there and we'll make that the global blue as well. And now we'll go in and we'll edit the global blue. So going in there and editing the fill, and let's go for orange. And as you can see, didn't do the first one. That's because the first one was just blue. That's all, just blue. It wasn't global blue, but that's okay, because all I need to do is go back and select it, making sure I've got the right bit, which is the background curve, and just choose what now isn't blue, it's orange. But it's the ancillary colour, the complementary colour. And now every time I go in and I do an edit on it, so now they're heading off into green, like that. I only gave them one colour choice and black, that was why. A bit like Henry T. Ford, wasn't it? With his Model T Ford. You can have it in any colour as long as it's black. So I went for maroon and black. But I could come in here, yeah, we like that, but we'd like it a little bit more aqua. So we can come around there a little bit. Oh, yes, that's looking a little bit better. Like a little bit cleaner than that, though. Can we push it up there? Now we want it deeper. And they settle on that as their secondary one. And it's that simple. Now, I only coloured 3 things there with it. But if you can imagine the number of elements that I've got in this branding file, and that's not even the full branding file. There is another branding file that has got that. That's the printables. But the other branding file has everything. The logos, summer fair stuff, other brochures, you name it. It's got all of that in and more. So all I have to do is change one colour. That is what a global colour is, and that is how you use it and why you use it. Right, let's go on and have a look then, because what we've done so far, we've added colours and things. We've had a play, we've added colours. Let's go back to our squares here. I'm going back and we'll get Bruno Brown again, which is our system palette. And just to show you in here that you can rename palettes and you can delete palettes. Be careful when you're deleting palettes. You might be an Affinity Designer and think, I don't need that Scrivener one. What do I need that for? But if you delete it, you'll break Scrivener. So don't do it. Might be an idea if you're creating your own system palettes to put your initials at the beginning so you know which ones are yours. You then know they're safe to delete. So just a purely practical point. You can, and I know we had a question about this, can you set defaults? Yes, you can. You can make a palette and then you can come in here and you can set it as the default for a colour space. So there are 6 colour spaces in there and you can set a specific palette as the default for one or more of those colour spaces. So yes, you can absolutely do that. But we've got exciting things now, because at the moment we've been creating palettes and we've been doing it the hard way, the real long hard way, which is we've been adding things one at a time. Now Bruno here's got some fantastic colours, but we've only managed to pick out 7 of them. Wouldn't it be great if we could pick out a lot more of them and do it really quickly? And that you can do. You can go up to the menu and you can go create palette from document. And this is why you probably looked at this and thought, no idea what I'm doing, I'll leave it alone. Because you need to choose the type of palette before you go any further. And that's why I really emphasize the type of palettes that Affinity Designer can create. Application palettes, document palettes, and system palettes. So you need to choose what type of palette at this point you would like to create. So which one should we go for? Well, as I said, if it's just to work in this image, then you can quite happily create a document palette. If you want it system-wide, because what you create here you want to use in other applications, make it a system one. Alternatively, you could make it an application palette and have it available within Affinity Designer. The choice is really up to you. The process is identical, irrespective of which one you choose. So we'll go for document to keep it out of the system because we've got a lot in there already. And that's it. It just does it. It uses the currently open file and it adds all of the colours that it finds over here to create extra swatches in there. So that was really painless, wasn't it? Did that all by itself. Of course, if you choose to do that, you've now got 20, 30, 40 swatches called Bruno and a number. So you're going to be a while naming them. But you're going to name them, aren't you? Because you'll thank me later. So that's how you do it from there. But what if you want to create a colour palette from somewhere else, from another image entirely? You can do that too. So back up to the menu. And this time it's Create Palette from Image. And I go into there. And you get this dialog box. Not the most interesting of dialog boxes, but give it time. You need to tell it where to find the image. So go and select the image. And in there, I'm going into my data folder. And in here, I've got a couple of files that I can use. So I'm going to choose this peachy one to start with and open that. And it's just loading in a JPEG, just copyright-free image that I've got online, and it's created 5 swatches from it. If you want less, you can take it down to 3 and then hit preview and it will give you 3. You can take that all the way up to 256 and you can preview it again and it shows you all of these colours. Problem with doing that with so many is that, like the one on the left and the one on the right here that are very pale, very difficult to choose between them. So you could find yourself with inconsistent colours just because they are so similar. So I tend to stick to sort of between 5 and 10 and get like a primary range of colours and then maybe add some extras in later. So if we take that down to 10 and preview that, it will pick out the 10 predominant colours in there. So you can see it's got the grey from the table and it's got the yellow and the orange from the fruit. Where it's picked that pink up from, must be in there somewhere. So it's picked up those 10 colours. You still at this point have the opportunity to change your mind for the location. Location meaning an application palette, a system palette, a document palette, or a currently selected palette. So we could actually add these to the Bruno palette by saying currently selected and then just click create and it adds those 10 into the palette that we already had. So let's do that again with one other image. So I'm going to go down and say create palette from image. This time I'll choose the soap one, which was that one there. And I'll add that to that one as well. So we'll take 10 from there. It automatically defaults to 5, but you can type in 10 and preview it. You're going to think about it. Yeah, that one was a little bit complicated because there's so many colours in it. And I will add that again to the currently selected one. Now, the reason that that is actually important is because not only can you do it from doing it in that kind of way, but you can also do it in other ways. So I'm going to come back to that. What I'm going to do is look at importing them and I'll show you why it's important that you can actually pull colours from an image. But first of all, you may have colours that are either given to you from a client, they're given to you from an agency, you've downloaded from the internet, you've swapped with a friend, whatever, but you've got some colours. And the good news is that you can import swatch palettes. You have an option to import down here. Again, the first thing you need to do is to tell it what type of palette you want to work with, application, document or system. I'll say document. I will go for document and then it goes out to here. And I have a big folder full of colour palettes. I have different file formats in here. I have 3 different file formats. I've got Golden Beach, which is an ACO. I've got Microsoft Alparishes and ScreenFlow as ASEs. And I have a CLR. Not many people know the extensions for these colour palettes and why they're different and what they mean. But you will, I'll tell you. The ASE is the most common. It stands for Adobe Swatch File. And it is the method by which you can transport colours between applications. And as I say, Affinity Designer supports it. A CLR file is a colour palette file at system level on a Mac. And an ACO file, sadly, is an Adobe Color file that is not supported by Affinity Designer. It is not supported by Affinity Photo either. I say sadly because, unfortunately, it's becoming the standard within Adobe applications and it's not supported anywhere else. fabulous. But we'll worry about that in a moment. What we'll do first is we will import this Microsoft one. There's quite a few colours in there from memory. We will import that. So we will click open and it loads it in as a document palette, which is why we can have two of them. One is the document, one is the system one. It's exactly the same colours actually, but we will go and have a look at that. These are the colours that we have. And because, as I've shown you, I took the time to name them, I can type in, oh, Visio isn't there. Good grief. Don't tell me I didn't name them. Oh, naughty me, it doesn't look like I did name them. Let's try Word. No, I didn't. Bad me. But I can tell by looking at it that green is, I'm editing the fill and I don't want to edit the fill. I want to rename the fill. Oh, I did. I left it as the hex colour. It's all right. I'm slapping myself. Don't worry about it. I'm really reprimanding myself. Right, Excel, and it will find it. So don't do as I do. Don't do as I... No, do as I say, not as I do. Naughty me. Right, so we've done that. We've imported one. But the problem is, what if somebody sends you a file and it's an ACO file? And now you're not pleased. You're not pleased because you cannot import it. If I show you this file, I've got a folder over here, so I'll bring it onto the screen. There is the file. I can preview it, and it is an ACO swatch file, tells me that much, but I can't even preview the colours. Those colours in that icon are generic. They are not the colours inside this swatch file. That's not helpful at all. But what I can do is this, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to rename Golden Beach to Golden Beach. Oh, let's pick somewhere. Where can we pick? Spain. This is because I've actually already imported this once and I haven't had a chance to delete it. So this is the Golden Beach from Spain. Now, what I need to do is convert it, and there is a way to convert it. It is an application that's available from the Mac App Store. And I will, no, not convert, it's importer, isn't it? Color Palette Importer, it's called. So bringing that up, and it's really a simple application. It's $1.99 at the moment. And all you need to do is to drop the file on it. It couldn't be easier. And not only will it convert it, it will allow you to have a good old play with it as well. So I'll move this out of the way and just drag it up to the middle there, taking the file that Affinity can't read and putting it into Color Palette Importer. Right, those are the 10 colours that are in there. Some of them are named, some just say beige, A, B, C, D and E, but others actually have names in them. If I decided I wanted to call this sort of coffee, right, this last one, let's say milky coffee, I can double click it and actually start typing in a new name for it. So milky coffee. I didn't mean to do that, go away. I can do a few other things in here as well. I can actually double click on a colour and preview it, and as I keep clicking it takes me through all of the colours so I can have a good old preview in there and then escape to stop doing that. But what I wanted to do was import it. I wanted to convert it. I want to convert it so I can use it in Affinity. I need to use these colours in Affinity. They're from the client. And they could well be. You could be doing a website for a client that's got colour swatches from their print designer, and you're lumbered with it and you're thinking, but I'm using Affinity and this is a Photoshop file and I can't read it. And this is why this is important. You can choose to save it to a new palette. And if you did, you can specify the name for that here. If I click on the drop down there, you can see it also lists other palettes. And we should know by looking at these names, there's the Golden Beach one, my original import, these are system palettes. So it's going to save this at system level. Now I don't want to add it, I want to create a new palette. So I will go for new palette and I will call it Golden Beach Spain and hit import. Now at this point, it's picked the right place to save it because this is important. It not only needs to be in the right format to be read by the system, it needs to be in the right location. And the right location is the colours folder deep, deep down within your system. So I will show you by going up there. It's your computer. Mine's called Serenity, but obviously tonight it's got one on itself, so nothing serene. There's the Macintosh HD, Users folder, My folder, Library folder, Colours. That's where it needs to be. And Color Palette Importer knows that. So all I need to do is to click Save. It then tells you that it's already saved it. You will find it when you in the colour palette when you restart the target application. which was what happened to us with Pages, if you remember. So I'll OK on that. That's absolutely fine. And I can close that application down. Its job is done. I will go in here and just have a quick look. Has it actually come through? It was Golden Beach, Spain. And as I look down here, no, it hasn't. It hasn't at all. So I'm going to have to restart it. So what I'm going to need to do is save all these files that I've got. We don't actually need that one. That was our global colours. I will save it anyway. Let's call it global and stick it on the desktop. And at that point, close it down. Now, my Affinity Designer file for Bruno is here, so I can just double click to open up Bruno. And we should get back to exactly where we were with Bruno. But this time, my new palette should be available, which is Golden Beach, Spain, and there it is. So the previously ACO file that it couldn't read because it's not supported. Now, I don't know why it's not supported. I don't know if this is an Affinity issue or if this is an Adobe issue where it doesn't want them to allow to be read. No idea. But it's not a problem because we can just convert it. So it's now being converted and we can actually use it. So with our button selected, we can choose deep colours up here. We can go for something sort of like that. The colours that we need are available. Just to show you, one of them was called coffee and one of them was called mint. So if I start typing in mint, it filters down for mint. And if I put in coffee, it filters down for coffee. So it really is worth taking the time, like I didn't, to name those files. It really is worth the while doing that. So that's how you can import them. You can also export them. So going up here, go down to export. This time I'll put it on the desktop. I'll leave it set to Golden Beach, Spain, and just hit the save button. It will have put a file on my desktop there. You can see a tiny arrow telling you I'm uploading this to iCloud. My desktop syncs with iCloud. And there's my file. So it's a really great way to be able to share colours with people and also back up your own colours as well. I do suggest that you back up your own colours so you can export as well. Now, I mentioned how important it was to be able to import from a picture. And this is why. So let's do this. I need to do one thing first. I might go quiet while I do. I need to grab a torch. You're wondering why I need to grab a torch. I'm wondering why I need to grab a torch as well. I demonstrated this earlier in an earlier session and I had it on a separate desk. And apparently my microphone, very sensitive as it is, wasn't playing ball nicely when I did that. So I've set up my desk to be able to take a picture. What I'm doing now is I'm getting here an app on my phone. So I'm getting my phone so I can share it with you. Hopefully that will play ball. Oh, isn't it nice when it works? Just let me enjoy that for a moment. Oh, that was good. Right. I've got an app here that's free. It's Adobe Capture. Now, to use it, you need an Adobe account. Don't panic. It's free. You can get a free Creative Cloud account. You do not need to subscribe for this. So I'll run that application and it does a lot of things, does Capture, because it replaced about 5 other applications. But all I'm interested in is making a colour palette from a photograph. I know I could take a photograph and then send it up to my machine, probably email it to myself, and then open it in Affinity and then pull all the colours in, but I don't want to do that. I want to do it in here. I want to do it fast. I want it to be there on my desktop when I get back to work. And what I need to do is to tap that plus button at the bottom, and it brings up an option to capture from the colour wheels, sliders, etc., or the camera. Well, let's go for the camera. Don't panic, this is my desk. It's my desk with all my pills on it. They're vitamin pills as well. I'm a bit of a health freak at the moment. And I've also put, just for good measure, zoom down to there, you're not picking up the right colours, but I've got my post-it notepad as well. So what I want to do with that is get some really good colours, and they're not really good colours, are they? It's picking all around the edges and my desk, and that's terrible. And I can move it. You see I'm moving it. As I move it, it does change. I've now got all the greens. But, well, I quite like that one actually, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is just tap the screen once in the middle, and it's frozen the screen. So I've got all the elements on the screen that I want. And now what I can do is tap and move these little colour wells to pick up the colours I want. So I don't want the murky desk ones. I want the nice purpley ones over here. And I quite like that one, but that one there, I'd rather have a sort of bluish colour. And then this one I'll take up and hopefully get a quite deep red. So I quite like that. Right, that's perfect. At this stage, I've not saved anything. I've frozen my screen. If I was to unfreeze it, it would let me retake the shot, but obviously I don't want to retake it. That's perfect. I want to save that. So I tap the big white dot at the bottom, and that takes me on to the next step. The next step lets me tweak it. So that purple one, if I wanted it to be a little bit more purple, I could just slide these things up and down. So I can actually change it completely or just get the purple that I want. I can do that with each one just by tapping the colour, and the one with the white frame is the one that I'm editing, and that's why the sliders change as I tap it. If I'm happy with that, I tap next. That takes me onto here. Shows me the photograph it came from. That was the image that it came from. It's called Colour Theme 11. Not great. I'm going to take that back and call it V pills, because they're my vitamin pills. I rattle when I walk. I'm happy with it to be sent to a CC library because I don't care, I don't use it. And I don't want it discoverable, so discoverable is turned off. I'll show you what discoverable means in a second. And at this point, I'm just going to save that. So save my colour theme. I can still go in here and edit it. So imagine you're out for the day and you see a beautiful location, all right? And you just want to take a picture and think, oh, that would make a great colour swatch, colour palette. You can do that. You can absolutely do that. You can even go in here and tap it afterwards. There's your preview. There's your info. There's your image. So you can see all of that. And you can then edit that. If you want to, it will open it up for editing. But I don't want to. I'm happy with that. I'm going back to my library. That is me done for using my phone to do it with. And that could be a picture of absolutely anything. But we will come out of that now. I will close down the app that's showing you my phone and get back into Affinity to show you how that is working. Because what we need to go to a website, Adobe Color. So let's go and look for Adobe Color, and then I'll bring it onto the screen for you. If only I could type and speak at the same time. Clearly that is beyond me. Right, and I've put a U in colour, which isn't helping anybody either. Right, so I'm going to go to Adobe Color. That is color.adobe.com. You may remember this as Adobe Cooler. That was when it was cooler. Now it's hideous. It's hideous because it doesn't let you export it. It will save it to a CC library, from whence you will not be using it with Affinity. Fear not, I have us covered. So this is my account. I need to see my themes. I'm logged in, top right. I need to see my themes. There are my themes. It loads in by its learning. It loads in my library. It loads in Made in Shape. And there is VPills, the one that I have just created. I can then edit a copy, or I can look at the info of it. And there it is. That's the colour palette that I've just made. I have a magic trick. The magic trick I have is called Snappy. Snappy app. And Snappy lets me take screenshots. And I'm going to take a screenshot of that. And I'm not going to get any edges in it. You can actually see where I'm taking that screenshot. Taking it right round there. Don't want anything else in it but those colours, because that is my colour palette. If your screen flickered, it was supposed to. It was supposed to because it actually opens up that snap on your screen. I love that because I can refer to it. And it floats over every other window. Even if I click on my browser, this, which is my colour palette, floats on the top. Love Snappy app. That's all I need. I now do not care about Adobe anymore. They've gone. They are history. They have gone. What I now need to do, because to close this image, I'm just going to double click it. That loses it. I will now show you what Snappy app looks like. That's Snappy app. And that will show you that that is VPills colour theme by me. That's the file that I want. And what I'm going to do is drag it out of here and drop it on my desktop. Make sure it's called VPills. And I'm good to go. You should know what's coming next because we've already done it once. The reason we've gone through this rigmarole is so we can do it in exactly the same way as these expensive subscription software services do in Affinity. Using their own applications. They love me, don't they? Not really. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into here, I'm going to add a new palette. So create palette from image. Go and choose the image. The image is on my desktop. It's VPills on my desktop. And there it is. We took that straight from the browser. And I'm going to hit open on that. And there are the colours from it. They do match. Somehow they're in a different order, but they do absolutely match because I've tested it and they do. You can change the number of colours, but obviously in this circumstance it would make no sense to do that whatsoever. And then I need to add to either the application, the system, or the document. I'm going to add this one to the system. And I will create that. And it's as simple as that. It's actually done it. So up here now, I have a system palette. You can see that because it's got the Apple icon. It's called VPills, and there are my 5 colours. And I can now use that in any way I choose in Affinity Designer. So just to go over what that process was, I took a photo using Adobe Color, which is free. I used my free Adobe ID to transfer it to the Adobe Color service in a browser. I took a screenshot with a free application called Snappy, and then I loaded it into Affinity Designer. And as you can see from my Snappy images, the reason why I didn't just use the built-in screen capturing is because I can build up quite a library in here. Here are all the other ones I was doing as I was prepping. So I could actually create a library of just my own swatches. So if I only used Snappy for that, I've got backups of everything that I've done. Actually, you can see here I use this for other stuff as well. I dread to think what else is down here. These are all the images from my presentation. So there's quite a few things in there. I do use Snappy a lot. Right, so I think that's a really good example of what you can do with a little bit of ingenuity, even though Affinity Designer doesn't support it straight out of the box. You can also download colours. So let's go and have a look at that. There is a few locations you can download colours from. One of the best in terms of the functionality that it has is called Colour Lovers. The only thing that freaks me out about Colour Lovers is that there's lots and lots of adverts on it, and I am always freaked out as to what will come up in a live demo. So I will move it onto the screen, but I've scrolled down a little bit so we can avoid some of the more salacious adverts at the top. Diet stuff and things, we're not interested in that. Right, so what I've done is I've done a search for beach, and it's come up with all of these options here. And all you need to do, if you're thinking, well, yeah, I quite like that one. Yeah, sand in my shoe, quite like that. Let's have a look at that. All you need to do is double click it, and it will then open that up in there. And there's those adverts I was telling you about. We don't want to be tempted by Mackie D's. Now, what you can do in here, first thing to check is the licensing. You can go down here, and this credit must be given to Sonia B. Gnomes, is that? Gomez? So thank you very much for doing that. There's a credit to you. And what you can do is you can download it. You can download it in any one of these formats. Lots and lots of formats that you can download it in. Obviously, if you've got a preference, ASE will load you in a lot easier than many of the others. So this one does support ASE. I would choose ASE. And you can choose a zip file. If you choose a zip file, it downloads the lot. All of them. So let's have a look at that one. That was quite bright, wasn't it? We've got that one. We've got a few others. Let's go for that one. So what I'll do is I'll download the zip file, and it's downloaded it here. I'll click it, which will open it. So sand in my shoes, there's the zip file, and there is the unzipped thing. I have all of my files, my ACO, my Illustrator file, my ASE, CS, all of the files are all in here. So if we have a look at like that one, that's what it looks like in HTML. And we've got a text, that's XML, that's what a text file looks like. So that gives you the hex codes. What we're interested in is this ASE file, because what we want to do is import it. So you can do this in the way that we've seen already, but I will show you again, just showing you from there. So we will do an import palette. We'll do it as a document palette. We will import from the downloads, where have you gone? And it was sand in my shoes. Only one of them is active. And that's the only one that Affinity Designer will let you import. So we'll go up there, make sure we've chosen that and open that. And that's it. The screen didn't even flicker. It didn't even get a chance to flicker. Sand in my shoes, and there are the colours. And you can then use those exactly the way that we've been using all of the others. So that's just one site that you can go and download them from. There are lots and lots of files that will let you do that. Locations, services, all kinds of things that will let you do that. Okay, we've covered quite a lot. So what I'm suggesting that we do is go in and have a recap of all that. So I will go in here and we'll recap. So I said that there were lots of different colour spaces and that you can allocate any of the palettes to any of the colour spaces. Make that the default for those. You can definitely do that. You also have a global colour picker. And that global colour picker is the one that's in all of the dialog boxes. it doesn't look like it's active. It doesn't look like it does anything. It looks like an interface element, but it is. It's alive. And you click and hold the left mouse button as you drag it over interface elements, and it goes outside the screen as well. You also have the color wheel. That's the default view for the color panel. The color panel also, though, has other options, which are the wheel, the sliders, the boxes, and the tints. And each one of those changes that interface slightly to enable you to work with colours. So the tint doesn't change it too much, that's the least one, but they change it all in some way. You also then have the colour picker tool. And the colour picker tool is actually a dedicated tool for picking colours. I've been saying that when you're working with colours, if you want to work with the default option, this is your default option. It's your sRGB IEC 61 1966 2.1. Catchy title for default. You could start working that and get the job going. And then if you find that you need a certain output, you can change it later. So if you know how you'll be working, change your colour profile to start with. But if you don't, start with the default and then make changes. The difference between those colour pickers, I have gone over it, I'll go over it again. You can select from anywhere on the screen with the colour picker. It does support multiple screens, any screens on your Mac, including if you're reflecting something to an iPad, and you can use something like Duet to do that. You can select off there as well. But it's a two-step process. You have to click it and then you have to click again to apply it. But you will find that interface across all of the dialog boxes that support colour. The colour picker tool only allows you to pick from your working area, your canvas area, or your design area, however you want to describe it. But it's faster if you tick the box because it will do a single step process. It also has presets in terms of the selection area, and that allows you to select average colours, which the general colour picker does not. Then we moved on to colour palettes, and there were three types of colour palettes. There were the document palettes that only exist within the specific document you're working in. There was application palettes that are specific to the application you're in. And there's system palettes, which I love because they are system global. And that will allow you to use them in other applications. Then there is the perennial problem of working with shared swatches, that you have got colours from Photoshop, you've got colours from Illustrator, you've got colours from all over the place, and you want to be able to use them in Affinity Designer. Now, Photoshop exports to one of two formats, ASE or ACO. And that means you could be faced with the problem of trying to get colours from ASEs, ACOs and CLRs into Affinity Designer. But you don't have to worry about that. Affinity Designer can natively read ASE files. It can natively work with CLR files. It needs a little bit of a hand with ACO files, but if you convert them, it can then use those as well. So you will not be stuck with something from a client that you can't use. There are ways around it. I also said do not, under any circumstances, underestimate the macOS colour picker, because actually it's nothing short of amazing if you know how to use it. It doesn't do a great job of making its fantastic features available for use. You really have to go and look and see what you can make it do. But when you get in there, it is amazing. And I'll make sure that there is a link to a video that I did. I think it must have been Mavericks or Yosemite, probably Yosemite that I did it with. The only difference, everything else is the same. The only difference is that the pencils are pencils now and they used to be crayons. But they're still called crayons. But you know Apple, they've got logic somewhere. But the video will show you all of the secret hidden depths of the colour picker. To use that converter, to convert the palette, we used Colour Palette Converter. And I've put a U in that, but if you're searching for it, there's no U in it. It is $1.99 currently in the App Store. And it actually does more than just allow you to import it. There are more advanced options that you can have if you want to spend more money. But for $1.99, that will just get the job done. It will enable you to do it. But you can rename colours. You can edit, you can save out to different names, you could do all sorts of things with it. So for $1.99, that's a great investment. Then I showed using Adobe Capture, which was the app on the phone, to take a photo, take a picture and upload it into the Adobe Color system. So using Adobe Color, we then took a screenshot of it and we managed to import it straight into Affinity Designer. I also showed using Colour Lovers, which was the website that enabled you to download them, where I downloaded a zip and it had all of the options in there. So if you wanted to share a palette that you've worked with, you can load it into your application of choice, an Affinity one I would presume, and then you could share one of the other ones to somebody else who was using something else. So Colour Lovers, but do check the licensing on that. To take that screenshot, I've been using Snappy App, which is known as Snappy now, but I think the website's Snappy App. So Snappy or Snappy App. It's completely free of charge. It's recently had a big update. It's gone to version 2.0. It's amazing. There is also an iOS version of it, and it synchronizes. And did I mention it's free of charge? It's amazing. So that's available from the Mac App Store, and that's what I've been using to take the screenshots. So I've got a little library of them. Okay, I hope that has proved useful. When I started looking at colour in Affinity Designer and then Affinity Photo, I was frustrated. I couldn't work out what it was doing with certain things and why things were disappearing when I was clicking buttons that I didn't think should make anything disappear. It was all to do with the types of palettes, but I wasn't aware that there were different types of palettes. And who reads the manual? Well, I did. I sat down, I read the manual, and I worked out how that could interact with what I already knew about the system colour picker. And I was just blown away by how powerful it was. So hopefully I've been able to show you how powerful it is. There is far more I could talk about, but I think I've talked quite enough so far, don't you? I'll do a separate session on extra stuff that's even more exciting. But that gets you going with colour in Affinity Designer. In fact, I would say if you can master all of that, you are probably in the top 0.001% of people using Affinity Designer. Most people just stick with standard colours, or they'll get colours in some other way. There's no sort of mastery of the whole thing going on. But you can master the colour. It does make sense, and actually it's one of its best features. One of its best features I've found so far. So, as I say, I hope you found that useful. Let me know if you did. Let me know if you didn't. And if not, why not? Let me know what about it you need to know, and I shall try and sort you out. So I do love to hear from people. Do contact me in any one of those methods. But what I'm going to do now is head off into Q&A, talk to the folks that are here live, take some questions, give some answers, and come back next time when we're doing something else, but I don't know what. So if you want to have some input into what, do let me know. So I'm heading off into Q&A, and I will see you next time.